are you?
All right, good. Bill, you shake?
Since spring look.
Good evening.
Rise from Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Katie, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Baker?
Here.
Bilk? Here. Cox?
Here.
Frisone?
Here.
Hutchinson? Olson?
Here.
Pyatt? Here. Upholzer?
Here.
Wood?
Here.
I just want to remind everyone to make sure your microphones are on, please.
All right, thank you. All right, can I get a motion to excuse the absent members?
Motion to excuse absent member. Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Any public comment on the matters on the agenda? All right, hearing none, going to move on to approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, moving on. Approval of the previous meeting minutes of March 18th, 2025. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes as published?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, minutes pass. We have no correspondence to acknowledge. We'll bypass that. And looking for public comments on matters that are not on the agenda.
Good evening, everyone. Garrett Schumate, 31140 Island Drive. Just want to welcome the newest commission member, Nick Olson. I hope we can embrace him with open arms. I think it's an opportunity to revisit any training or education needs from the broader commission members. So I just ask you all to consider that as we bring Nick up to speed. If there's any broader systemic opportunities for everybody, we're here to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Can I bring one up that I found in the zoning ordinance while I was looking at the other C3 stuff?
Go ahead.
I see in the ordinance when I was looking at, it has the RV parks in the C3 for less than 40 sites, it says, and we passed in July, no more than 26. Does that just take a long time to update?
Yeah, it is in effect, but to get online, they have a whole procedure, and it does take a minute to update online.
Okay.
But it is in effect.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other public comment? All right, no unfinished business. Let's move on to new business. Katie, you want to take that one?
Yeah.
Okay, Jane.
That's all right. So the matter tonight is about second-story residential units in the C3 Marina District. I'm just going to start by acknowledging that we're currently in the process of rewriting the entire zoning ordinance, but it is a bit of a ball of yarn, and the more you unravel it, the more thoughtfulness you have to put into rolling it back up in a way that it doesn't tangle on itself. So in the meantime, the city is aware of properties that have historically functioned as second-story residential units in the Marina District. And because there was never, or there's no record of registration of these properties, and there's no knowledge that these properties were legally kind of existing, it was just something that evolved over time. It is not a non-conforming use, and then we want to see if there's a possibility to allow these types of units within the zoning requirements. So to create a legal pathway for these units that exist to be used in the way they've kind of been built out and have functioned in the past. So I am bringing to you for your consideration and discussion a very short amendment to the zoning ordinance that would allow residential units on upper floors of buildings in the C3 Marina Commercial District. And I do think there is some basis for this beyond just the fact that there are these structures that have these types of units. There's a point in the DDA, the Downtown Development Authority's district standards, in the zoning ordinance. It's a downtown waterfront overlay, and in that section, they do mention that residential units on upper floor buildings are a permitted use. The problem is, there's no record of where this overlay district exists. It's not on the zoning map. It's not described in the text of the zoning ordinance. So we can't utilize this text in any useful way in this case because we don't know what the geographic intention of that portion of the ordinance was. But I do think that it suggests that at some point, the Planning Commission or the administration thought that there was value to having and allowing residential units on upper floors in areas along the waterfront. So I include that background for you to consider as we discuss. I just thought it was important to note that someone has given thought to this in the past, and unfortunately, as with a lot of some of the quirks in the zoning ordinance, we just don't have the connecting piece to the geographic region, but we could fix that if the body so chooses by creating a text amendment that would introduce residential units in that C3 district. And I'm happy to answer questions, but that's just kind of a background of what we're going to discuss this evening.
I'll throw a couple of comments of my own on that. I think several of us, many of us were on here when we kind of formed that whole downtown district, if you will. And first of all, one of the requirements for having that second floor was it was on top of a commercial building. You can't just build nothing, like say, for example, parking, and have residential on top. It's got to be a commercial building entity below that, and from that, you could build on top a second floor. And my recollection in addition was there were certain requirements that if you did so much on that first floor as well, you could make a third floor as well. So it's there, you could have second and third floor if certain requirements were met on the main floor. That's just from my memory banks on that. So I would think if we want to put something in there, we should make a reference that it's got to be conforming to that, having commercial on the first floor, right, for one thing.
Well, I will say, just looking at the master plan, chapter 4, they start out with SEMCOG with their population projections, and they basically imply that the city does not have enough, based on aerial photographs, available property to actually develop, the projected housing needs 10 years from now. It's also mentioned in here that it would be reasonable for the master plan to be reevaluated to create, some non-residential land and have it redesignated as, residential land or mixed-use development. There's even a paragraph in here that basically talks for a variety of housing stock, the use of mixed-use buildings in the downtown that permit residential units above ground floor commercial uses. So it's already in the master plan. I don't see any problem with having it.
So wouldn't you want to tie it back to though, like an R1 zoning or an R2 or an R3? What do you want it to become? Is it a single resident home or is it going to be condos above a commercial building? So you have to control it. I don't think you can just open it up and say you can put as many buildings as you want or rooms. So you need to tie it back. And there is a zoning R1T, which is a single family dwelling together with accessory buildings already in our zoning ordinance. Would you say allow all rules of R1T goes to it and let it go out as that?
I don't think so, but for this body to decide. I think the intention was to kind of utilize the thought process that was in that downtown waterfront overlay, which was specifically that only units on the second floor above a commercial use would be able to be used as a residential unit. So it wouldn't be a single-family home that would be developed in that marina district. It would just be for commercial uses on the first floor, and if there was a second floor, and there are certain requirements to become a third floor, but nothing beyond that, that could then house residential units above a commercial use. Again, that's up for this
But
body
don't you have
to
to control the
discuss.
residential? Is it single family or multifamily, or is it single units? Is it 10 units? Is it?
Well, doesn't
Well,
it
it would
always
be-
stay
I think that's
C3?
sort of the developer's kind of option if you
You're
would.
just allowing it,
You're just allowing residential on top of a commercial.
and then our ordinances, then I'm sure there's probably things that look at it, are we storing gas tanks under it? Or is there oil storage under it, or boat storage under it? I mean, for safety of the residential above it, right?
Right, so
That would come into more of the,
I mean, if you
That's
if you look at the
much
available
zoning,
property
but-
that's really this pertains to, it's really the marinas. There's really nothing else that would qualify for this.
Because we have to give the residents some guidance, because right now there's space that's been utilized in the past, space that's probably utilized now, space they want to redevelop, expand on new buildings. So we have to have guidance to give them. And it's not going to fit exactly what we have on R1 right now.
I think this is the exact discussion to have, and if I could just add a few thoughts. Number one, to Jim's point, I think the commission needs to carefully consider that we went through an exhaustive exercise related to short-term rentals in the city of Gibraltar, and obviously enforced that we feel those are prohibited, and thus enacted that January 1st. So please carefully consider that in context. I think your point is very valid as well, which is we are aware that there is existing activity, and we've had discussions publicly and received public comment related to existing activity or historical activity. So while it's the intention, as you've alluded to in your background for commission members, of prior administration that's been involved in unlocking opportunity, I'm just asking the commission to very carefully consider the guardrails if you do unlock that may have precedent considerations or long-term impact on the trajectory of that area. So please just carefully consider that. I think you're having the right discussion.
Thank you.
If I may interject for a minute, listening to building officials talk, they were talking, it depends on what the first floor commercial property is, and the building code would require what type of fire barrier you would need between the first and second floor. So they would, if this was allowed and these units were not inspected, they will have to be inspected, and they would have to look at what is on the first floor commercial and see if they need to do any modifications to the building to put a fire barrier for the second floor. But that has been discussed.
but even that, allowing one, is there, the space, how big can it be? Are we gonna make 10 little, 20 by 30s and stack people in and have cars parked all
Would it-
over? Or they're gonna meet our R1 requirements, or?
Well, wouldn't it be relevant to the size of the commercial building, depending on units or structures along that way? I mean, you'd have to consider it. If it's a small building, obviously, they're not gonna have a lot of space on top of it. But
But
if
people
it's a
could
large commercial building,
But people could start making new buildings and lay these out, right? So is there any requirement to,
What's to stop them?
right?
Yeah,
what-
because
what-
there was a resident that came in that wanted to do just that. And the more we talked about it, the more expensive it got, and I think they finally put the plans aside. But it sounds like they it sounds like we're getting prepared for that again.
Then you got people living in there already.
Yeah, right.
How many are there today in the city? Is there only a couple right there at Daymark? Is that the only ones that have
Well,
people
you got
living?
one here, and then there's the one in 300 building there.
Yeah, the one right out there on
Old
Middle
barn.
Jib Road is what they wanted to develop
Right.
last couple years back, yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to pull that data, but I think it comes up, this topic is obviously coming up in context too of the enforcement of our ordinances and rental inspections, which is now obviously putting us on the situation of evaluating this bigger picture, so.
Yeah, and you've got two different types of things. You could be putting in either an apartment, or you could be putting in a townhouse that someone purchases. So it's really
Yeah.
two different things too.
That's
So-
what was mentioned, right, when they came in here before to try to develop.
If I may, to answer some of the, or at least provide some context to some of the things that have been brought up, because it would be on the second story, above a commercial use, it would, the intent of the waterfront overlays is also that it's creating more of that traditional downtown where you have a storefront with a apartment potentially above. So it would not, the way this language is, would not allow for a townhome where you know, in the traditional sense, where you would walk up to your front door on the main floor and there would be a main floor living area. It would be required that it would be above a commercial use. Additionally, the zoning ordinance does have language about size of dwelling units. So for a dwelling unit, in this case, at minimum, if it was an efficiency unit or a studio, it would be a minimum 450 square feet. Or for anything that was a one-bedroom, it would be 750 square feet minimum, with each additional bedroom having to be at least 250 square feet. So there is language existing in the zoning ordinance that does regulate this minimum size of the dwelling units. Obviously, there's no maximum on this. That's more about what traditionally what the market will bear and what a developer wants to develop if there was new development. But again, that even with the new development, it would be necessary for it to be above a commercial use and a commercial use that's allowed in the Marina District. So it wouldn't just be any type of commercial use, but one that's already allowed. And then to City Manager Blackburn's point, the building code does have requirements about what residential uses can be adjacent to potentially hazardous, you know, gasoline storage, things of that nature.
But, so couldn't you say that, you know, that in a C3, R1 zoning applies to buildings or units above commercial buildings? So now you're identifying what has to be for square footage and all that, and usage and.
Just for guideline.
Yeah, for guideline. I mean, we already, because they're pretty much a one-unit rental home, right? So,
So you would like something above and beyond the already existing requirements for a efficiency unit and a one-bedroom and a beyond type unit? Are you,
well, does that automatically apply
It-
to
it-
residential units
would,
on
yeah.
upper
Yes.
floors?
Yes.
It's not part of R1 or R2?
no,
or-
it's a separate requirement specifically just generally
for any
speaking for
housing.
size of any dwelling.
What about rentals? Short-term, long-term?
Rentals would have to, you know, it's any dwelling. So anywhere anyone is living, whether it's rented or owned, it would, at minimum, if it was just a studio apartment, would have to be 450 square feet, and then with the one bedroom jumping up to that
To
750
the
square feet.
Airbnb discussion, though, like, now in an R1 zone, you have to be 30 days is considered long-term. We can't have short-term, so will that automatically apply too?
That's my understanding of the.
Even though we don't
the-
make it R1, tied to an R1?
I think that's what I was raising up front, to be very clear, is that, to Jim's point, right, the descriptions you've read today, the question is, does our R1 prohibition of short-term rentals translate to this?
Got it. I haven't looked at that ordinance language, so I don't have it directly in front of me, but if it is the prohibition of just in the R1 zoning, then it would not apply to this because would be C3 zoning.
So we would want to add that to this so that that same restriction would apply.
Right,
At
and
least at this point.
so that would, I would say, it's probably the most efficient way to do that is adding that restriction to your short-term rental ordinance and applying it to
Everything.
everything.
So that's all commercial property out there now.
Yes.
And there's somebody still living in 300 over there.
I don't know the full details of the enforcement issue. I know that there was someone living there, and that's where this first came to the city's attention and the building department. And so I don't know the status of, if there is an individual. I am aware that there was someone living there, and they may still
We
be.
say 300, what building is that?
Huh?
Which building is that? You say
One
3.
over where you, behind, where you go in off of Adams. Adams in the middle jib.
Oh, there's one back there?
Yeah.
From what I was told, there's somebody living in 13250, 13300, and 13400 is my
I just know about these two. I don't know about the
Though-
other one.
Those are on-ground residential locations, they're not above a commercial.
Right.
250 is on the ground. I thought 300's on the ground too.
I don't know about 300.
Yeah, 300 is,
got one entrance that won't pass fire code, I'll guarantee.
Right.
Because there's no door, there's only, they took off the commercial door and put up a glass door. There's no windows, and there's only one way in and one way out on the first floor. Because for egress purposes, it will not pass a fire inspection. You gotta go down, I believe it's 13 stairs to get to a downstairs exit to get out.
That's an enforcement issue, guys. That's not something for this body.
ask that we retain
comment But again, I mean, who picks on what in this city? Because now we're picking on the people renting. There's boats there's a couple that have been there all year for a couple of years living in it. Nobody does anything about that. And that's stated in the zoning that they can't live in their boats all year round.
right.
So.
Yeah, it's
who
definitely
picks and chooses and.
Enforcement is obviously a
Enforcement
hot topic that needs to be addressed. I'd ask the commission members to obviously consider the specifics of this decision required, but enforcement at large is obviously an issue that we've discussed at exhaust.
So you know there's 3 people living over in there, in them 3 buildings?
From what I was told, yes.
And we don't do nothing about it?
There's no clear, concise
It's,
language. I know ordinance department did write a ticket and it was sent to them. And myself and the mayor had a meeting with the owner, and the judge asked if the city and him can come to a resolution before it goes through the court process. We had that meeting. This was one step to go ahead with trying to come up with a resolution to the problems that we are having. If this is passed, I'm assuming that the building department would require all those units to be inspected to make sure that they meet code, because they haven't been inspected for under being rentals and stuff like that. So there will be things that will happen, but we don't have any. There seems to be no clear, concise language, and some language is conflicting, like the ordinance language with the DDA language with not a lot of background on that language. So this is one thing to try and clear it up.
let me ask a stupid question. Something happens over there and somebody's killed, who's responsible? Because there's a gentleman in every council meeting brings that up, and he's been doing it for 2 years.
He's here tonight. He's here tonight.
Yes, and that's why we are trying to
I
resolve.
just want to know who's responsible. 'Cause you already know they're over there.
This is not part of planning, I
It's
don't
not,
think,
it's not
guys.
planning commission. That's an enforcement issue, so let's maybe stick to the.
So going
agenda
back to
at-
zoning,
at
why
hand.
wouldn't we make it a R3 multifamily on top of commercial buildings? R3's rentals, that they're 2-story, they'd know they're rentals, you have the inspections as rentals, why wouldn't you? That way it gives all the requirements to whoever has it. And
So here's my only question with that, and maybe the answer will come from the answer of it. Who's to say they're gonna be rentals? I know back when McGuire owned Humbug, he was talking about putting condos on top of that, not apartments, but condos. So that's not a rental, that's not subject to annual inspections, that's something that somebody owns.
But we're zoning now for
that-
rentals,
Well,
because that's all
but-
that exists.
That's my question, is do you want to limit it to rentals? Again,
Yeah,
the
we don't
property
want
may
to
develop,
tailor
maybe
our
develop as
guidance
condos.
to rentals.
You really can't regulate for ownership style. So, you can't tell someone whether or not, I mean, you can regulate short-term rentals, sure, you can have rental inspections, but the zoning ordinance does not function to say these can only be rentals. Yes, by some of the requirements, you're gonna naturally get apartment-type structures, but you really can't speak to specific language about whether it's gonna be a rental or an owned unit.
That clarifies that, thank you.
Answer the question about the R3 district, I guess my thoughts initially are, I'm not sure that you're gaining anything by saying it's an R3. I think it adds a layer of maybe confusion to create some sort of overlay with the R3 district over the C3 district. The R3 district has a lot of requirements for setbacks. You know, it's essentially creating either condos or apartment-style buildings. It has requirements about how many units need to be attached. It allows for units to be on the first floor. I mean, if it's something that you want units on the first floor and you want traditional-style apartment buildings in that marina area, then that's a conversation that, you know, this body can have. But given the type of structures that are in the marina district and not, you know, I don't know that they're going to necessarily change a whole lot, at least in the immediate future. I don't know that you're going to be getting to your goal if you were to apply those requirements of the, like, R3 district. Does that help illustrate maybe some of the comparisons to consider?
Yeah, I guess I was looking like at the houses on Adams, they're zoned R3, they're rentals. You know, now R3 does open up the door for condos and other things, right? But there needs to be some type of restrictions or guidelines for those properties on top of the commercial. You just can't say they're allowed to build them and that they could do anything they want. They
What,
need to be
I agree with you.
somehow,
What, I guess, what in addition to what she articulated as far as the square footage, what else would you be
yeah,
looking
well,
for?
like, I mean, we have zoning, like R1T, single resident homes attached to other buildings. Why wouldn't you just say we can zone this R1T on top of commercial buildings in C3? Now you go to, implies all R1T, they can go look what R1T is, and I don't know if setbacks and yards, like you say, you might lose that because you may not have it there. Maybe there's certain things that don't apply.
Can we not tailor an ordinance to this specific area?
that's what we're discussing is how do you want to
do you want to
tailor
accomplish that?
it?
But if we tailor it to what exists now, then we're not accomplishing our goal if somebody wants to like expand. Because they have what they have now, but someone did come in and wanted to expand that area and add condos, so. And it won't be just that building, it'll be, once we get something like this in place and there's a profit to be made, this will expand to other buildings.
So the fear is that someone's going to come in there and say, for example, that office front is outdated, so I'm going to knock the whole thing down and then build a whole new building, offices in the front or lower floor, and then I'm going to have 8 or 9 apartments or condos upstairs? Is that what the fear is?
I don't know, that's a
Well,
fear,
that's
that's
what-
kind
I mean,
of, that's what the vision was, as
I
saw it.
personally think mixed-use development is good. I don't personally, and it's just me, I'm only one person here. I guess let me ask you this. We approve it, the building codes will restrict what can go above a shop that's pulling out fuel tanks and working on boats versus what can go above an office. I don't think that's anything for us to try to litigate or decide, because I think the building codes will automatically do that. But personally, I don't have a fear of putting mixed-use development in that marina.
No, that was the vision for
Yeah,
the overlay district.
and why spend all the money and time developing a master plan that pretty much says, this is an idea that we should seriously consider, and then now we're just fighting against what's in our master plan? Why did we approve it? It just doesn't make sense to me. In the past, we've done things that, without looking at the master plan, and, you know, you make an attempt to look at it, say, oh, this fits, yes, you know, we gotta have some rules, but it fits. But now, you know, it's like, we're afraid of it. I don't think we should be afraid of it. I just think it's an opportunity that maybe, that we should look at, not turn it down, just do what we gotta do to mitigate our fears. But to me, mixed-use development, having a residential above commercial. I work in Dearborn, I've been there 6 years, and as soon as you think that density couldn't get any thicker, they find another way, and they're just thriving. There's nothing but people walking back and forth to the restaurants, using all the functions the city has. It's never been a problem,
I think we're
that I'm aware of, anyhow. So
afraid of
it
it, it's just, what's it gonna look like? I mean, do you want one big, long building that's 1,000 feet long with all units on top, or do you want 2, 5, you know,
I don't think-
60-foot ones
that's-
with 2
I don't know
units
that's our
max, or?
Place
what in
to
the
decide.
zoning?
That's the developer's place to decide and bring their plans to this commission to see if it's in the spirit and of the law and what our master plan calls for.
I think our biggest concern, well, I don't want to speak on everybody's behalf, though, is just to assure that we're not going to get into short-term rentals or Airbnbs in these districts, not necessarily size, yeah,
Yeah, so I guess I would.
How it's designed.
I think we all agree with that. So I guess to that effect, James, one thing we probably need to go back and take a look at is
Amending the language.
either amending that language or making this language here
Apply
to that.
Yes. To,
Rezone that property, because it's zoned commercial, marine, period.
Well-
It's not zoned residential, it's not zoned anything else.
the question that is being considered right now is whether or not residential units on upper floor buildings would be a permitted use within that commercial C3 district. I did want to acknowledge some of the questions around design. There are Downtown Development Authority specific development design standards that are in place. And that, thankfully for all of us, is tied to a geographic area. So if, you know, the question is, if someone wanted to come in and build a new building, they would have to comply with building entrances. There's specific language about how the rear entrances would be positioned and the primary entrance. There's design requirements about the doors and transom glass above the doors. There's design requirements about facade, building material, exterior colors. I mean, it's a lengthy list of requirements that this body at some point recommended and the commission passed in the past. So I guess I'm just adding that as context that because that C3 district does fall in that DDA area, there would be these types of design requirements on any sort of new development, whether or not it had residential on the upper floor.
Then you throw parking in it.
There's parking requirements as well, and how the parking needs to be considered and what yard it can be provided for in that area as well.
Shouldn't this body be thinking about parking, green zones, aesthetics, the pleasantry of having people commuting, coming to the area to enjoy themselves? I mean, that's our biggest interest if we're concerned about actually enriching the community, right? We should be focused on quality of pleasantry and comfort. I mean, that's what a lot plan and the planning commission goal is, right? Rather than being concerned about building department stuff, we should think about more what our responsibilities are, and I think it's delivering a set of rules that are going to enrich whatever is brought to our community and not leave us with something contrary to that, right? We want quality and value and we want it to improve in the community. So I think languages around parking, like I said, parking, green zones, walkways, are probably our first and best interest.
But that's the second phase. Right now, we're talking about the ones that are already living there. There's no pleasantries there. It's just
But that's,
cement
it.
and,
As the mayor said, that's an enforcement,
yeah.
right? That's an enforcement problem that, this body doesn't have, right, jurisdiction over
right,
that. And if we should encourage that be cleaned up before, we promote any further growth, because we certainly don't want it to go down that path again.
But it's been going on for a while, a long while.
I think one of the, to the city administrator's point, that this is maybe hopefully the first step in creating a pathway for those to be legal, for them to be inspected, for them to be a safe place for people to live, for them to comply with what the city wants to see. You know, right now, it's just a no. And there's this tension between, well, it's been there and there is an enforcement issue, absolutely. But if the body really just doesn't want to see residential units in that district, that's a perfectly okay answer if that's, you know, the will of the commission. But if you're looking to create a pathway for these existing units to comply and live up to what your aspirations are for the area, then that's, you know, looking at what that needs to be, this would be creating that first step.
Okay. I think the path forward is for you to go back and take a look at some suggestions as far as how do we maintain the concern about short-term rentals. Is there anything else you want her to look into from that?
I guess
anyone else
just when we
wants to
say
tee up into that?
residential, why are we saying residential units instead of just R1 units or R2 units? Or if they build condos on top of the commercial building, are they R3? Then they got to rezone it? Or are they just residential units and it's no longer a condo or a rental apartment complex, or it's just residential units? Or it could be a house, it could be a rental, it could be a condo, and you're just calling it residential unit because it's on top of a commercial building.
Correct.
Big, how many, you know,
So if we, you know, I hear the concerns about the how big, how many. If that's something that we want to discuss further, let's have that discussion, you know, tonight while we're all here, if everyone is willing. So I just want to make the distinction. R3 is a zoning district. It's not necessarily a type of unit. So the R3 allows residential units and then creates regulations that then creates a certain aesthetic or it's type of unit, right? It's attached dwelling units. This, because it's a commercial district, wouldn't be allowing a R3 unit. It wouldn't be allowing a house because it wouldn't be a standalone residential structure, right? It would be a unit, a residential unit above a commercial use. And so therefore it would, by definition, not be a single-family home.
what would it,
And the way I'm understanding it, it will remain C3.
Correct.
The only difference will be this is allowed within that zoning district.
Yes.
Okay.
On
So we
top
don't-
of a, on
on
top
it.
of a
So we don't have
commercial,
to worry
commercial
about if it's
entity.
R3, R1, T1.
And
or
my
RT1, R2.
recollection, again, and having some conversations with some of the landowners on the waterfront, is coming up with viable commercial entities that will support a first floor structure. The second story and third floor residential is probably an easy sell. It's getting the businesses created on the first layer that's the challenge. So I don't think you're gonna see a huge proliferation because they have to pay for that space.
what's the definition then if they're gonna put in residential units? Is it single family? Can you put 10 people in one residential unit? There's no control of how many people can stay in that
Well,
unit?
building code dictates how many people can stay within a certain amount of square footage and how many, you know, bathroom utilities and bedrooms are required for however many people. That's a life safety regulation, and that's typically not regulated within the zoning ordinance. The size of the dwelling unit, you can regulate in the zoning ordinance above and beyond what the minimums are in the building code. So the building code, I think, actually permits slightly smaller units, and your code then requires slightly larger units than the minimum standard at the state building code level. So if you wanted even bigger units, for instance, if in this district you said, my dream is that we're gonna have, I'm gonna be ridiculous for a minute, $1 million condos, and we wanna have at least, every condo be at least 3,000 square feet. You could put that type of regulation here and say, we want a minimum dwelling unit size of 3,000 square feet. So that's how you could look at what, shaping what type of development you might want to see. If you want to see only studio-type apartments, you could say, we only want to see efficiency dwelling units, and they can only be from 450 square feet to 1,000 square feet. Those are the types of regulations you could add if that's, the type, how you want to tailor this.
Wouldn't that all be relative to how large the areas are that are available to build on? I mean, we talk about R1s and homes, and we have minimum minimum lot requirements, maximum footprint on a lot. Does that even fit in the area? Don't we want to tailor what we're going to allow to what the space can provide? Because it doesn't seem like a whole lot of area over there.
Well, if you're
Yeah.
talking about,
I mean, in terms of development, it's a very small area.
Right.
Right?
I think, number one, clearly the commission needs more information from my perspective on a variety of different details here. I revert back to my opening comments. I think you need to decide, do you want second floor dwelling units? Like, that's a strategic question, or do you not?
it's done right.
Then you can, if you conceptually, strategically, if you want dwelling to happen on a second floor, C3 allowance, then you can start saying, what guardrails do you want to put in? How many would you like? What size would you like? What, all of those elements. So I think the commission, I just encourage the commission to say, what do you need from our city planner to make sure you have the right information to inform that decision? But I think it's really a strategic decision, and that's why I asked you up front is, it's precedent, it's guardrails, and it's long-term trajectory. And you're deciding that based on, do you even want anybody able to reside on a second floor above a commercial building? If yes, what guardrails do you want, and what information you need to inform those guardrails? And I just ask that we focus on that, because I think it will help guide you in where you want to go. If it's a no, then it's a no, and it stops there. There is no guardrail discussion.
Right.
Well, I do think the long-term part is the most important part. Because it does open the door for opportunity for developers. I'll openly admit that. I mean, it's, if you can put residential on top of commercial buildings in there, now there's a whole different mindset of what that property may be worth and what the usefulness of that property is. I don't know what kind of money a marina makes. But, the developers do. So, it's a long-term thing. I'm not really concerned about making rules for who currently lives there. My concern is, long-term. Now, I'm a proponent of mixed-use development. I actually believe that if a city can't grow, it slowly dies off, but that's just my opinion. There is no other land space to develop around here because it's all wetlands, and we give a lot of it away. We're surrounded by, wildlife refuge in a park. So, somebody with deep pockets, may take a look at our new ordinance if we ever do, pass this rule and say, marina's nice, but, I don't have a problem, maybe just putting up another seawall, backfilling, and putting up 200 condos in there, as long as it's commercial. Again, they got to find a business that's going to support the lower floor. But what I don't know is, if it's commercial but empty, can they just keep it empty? Because the money may be selling the units upstairs. So, yeah, it's a long-term thought process here, so.
But what's going to dictate the size of the apartments is the size of the businesses down below.
Yes, I would think so, yeah.
So,
Wouldn't all of this be required, the initial requirement would to be to, how much space do we have? What size buildings can we have? how much parking is then available afterward. And we kind of need a picture of the space and maybe a proposal, and I don't know if.
Didn't that waterlay overlay district have that kind of laid out for us? I mean,
They
it
did,
was-
there was an actual video, and somewhere I have the original
Oh, me too.
DVD, and it showed like an animated walkthrough of what that overlay district could look like. And it showed, all shops along North Jib, and then of course with a sidewalk across the whole length, and, the trees planted. And then, there was residential and stuff above on the second floors, and the marina was still in the back. The rendering, to me, looked fantastic. I mean, because it gave us a downtown.
Was it just an aesthetic picture, or were the areas actually laid out to facilitate?
That was a 3D model.
all the-
It was a 3D model that you kind of
Right,
could almost
so-
fly through and see what it looked like and the sizes and everything else. And, but again, this was a conception. It wasn't,
Right, but we would need some kind of a sense of what actually works there in terms of how many commercial units, how many residential, how many commercial parking would need to support it, how many residential parking spaces would need to support it, and the potential for, as I said, green areas, something to keep the community looking beautiful. Is that something our planner can put together for us, or?
Well, I guess I'm gonna offer an alternative perspective, and yes, we can spend time kind of coming up with a concept, but I think ultimately, the way that property gets developed and property rights function is you create guardrails, and then a developer comes to you with the proposal to make those things work. And so your concern is making sure that we have the right guardrails. I hear that,
Exactly,
yes.
Exactly. Are we
And
allowing the right footprints for the dwellings and the right footprints for the parking and supporting lot plan?
And so I can come back with a more thorough analysis. I don't know that it's coming up with drawings, I don't know that that's going to serve your purpose, but I can highlight, okay, this is what your current parking requirements would be, and those are going to flex depending on what type of commercial use you have on the bottom floor. And obviously, there's requirements for the residential component, and it's up for a developer then to kind of play a little bit around with, well, I can accommodate a 3,000 square foot building with an upper floor, and this is going to have 2 units because that's how much parking I can support. So I'm not going to scenario plan every single type of scenario, but I can give a little more context around the requirements that are already existing. And that's, I do think you have, with that visioning that was done with the DDA requirements, you have a good basis that maybe we need to build upon, but there is language about landscaping and trees and how those need to be evaluated in the parking and where parking can be. So there was a lot of thought at that time given to the guardrails that would create that. I haven't seen that 3D image, but it sounds like, there was clearly a pathway that was developed. It said, okay, if we put all of these requirements in, building setback, it means, the building height, it can't be more than 2 stories, 28 feet. So there was a lot to thought given to that. And we can discuss what exists and then see where those gaps are and what, if it's more green space that we think that it needs, then let's add a clause about that.
And then we'd say, go and then grandfather the ones that are there and just say from this date forward, this is, because that'll knock them right out of being conforming, right?
Yes.
Current ones.
So it would be any uses requiring a site plan review would trigger these requirements. If you permitted the use, it would be up to this, if you wanted to trigger the site plan review, you could, but if you permitted the use, and I think at this point, if the use is existing, typically it would move forward without a full site plan review. That would be something for this body to decide, though, because I think, you could trigger, if it was a use change, if it was a reoccupancy, you could say, we want these requirements or some of these requirements to come into play.
So currently, our first step is we're looking to move forward with saying, yes, we are okay with building second story on top commercial. That's the first, just,
First
it's
step,
broad.
yes.
We have to have guardrails, and we understand that. It has to, by the building code, and our first thing is, we're just saying, yes, we're okay with this. With guardrails.
Yes.
With specific stuff that has to be met, and it has to go in front of the board again, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be helpful just in this discussion, at least if we could walk away with some sort of understanding or maybe not consensus, but hopefully around yes or no, and then a little more direction on what those guardrails, what those major concerns are, so I could come back next month with more context about the guardrails, and we could have a more productive conversation about those, but at least we would know we do want to move forward with this.
So do we want to take an informal poll as to where you guys stand relative to having second-story residential on top of first-floor commercial?
Let me ask a question before we take a poll. So what are we trying to accomplish here? We try to accomplish getting what's currently existing, build some guidance around it so they can survive with living there?
That's a good question. I mean, to me, there's two things I'm hearing.
Yeah.
One is looking to kind of codify the direction we want to have going forward for kind of the vision of the original waterfront overlay district, and then getting that into our current rules that are in effect. And that's one piece of it. And it sounds like their secondary track is, what do we do about the non-conforming ones that exist today?
Yeah.
So I guess let's take the non-conforming thing, set that aside for a minute. Let's talk about the overlay district and see if there's a consensus that we want to get something into our current ordinances that speak to and allow for second-story residential on top of a commercial. So let's take a poll on that. Guys, Katie, you want to call the poll on that, if you would?
We're doing a poll, I don't want to do a motion,
Well, I think we just do a poll. 'Cause
So
we're not
we're
really
just
voting- we're
talking
not really
about-
voting anything here. We're just kind of doing a poll to see where we want, what direction we want to give.
Yeah, it's a poll
Motion, Jeff.
versus a vote.
Yeah.
Versus a
Yeah,
motion.
just-
So I guess let's do a motion to take a poll on direction.
Well, this
to
is
give.
not an action item then,
This isn't,
not an action item, it's just,
just see where everyone is.
Right.
Yeah.
Just want to see where everybody's at.
Correct.
well, I'm all for, let's, going forward and investigating it further, just to, see whether there's any detriment, to our city. I think it's something we should be looking at, so.
Okay.
Well, the other thing they showed pictures of is, that was the company that come in here. They were gonna tear down where Captain Jim's is now, and it was all a boardwalk going down North Jib. They weren't gonna have any outdoor storage.
Well, there was a lot of things that were in there that were theoretical. They were talking
Right.
about tearing down the racket store and putting a hotel up in there, and then,
Yeah,
so.
I'm open to the idea. I think if it's done right, it could be very nice for the area, but I don't think we have enough information right now to really cast a vote
right.
on anything.
First, you gotta get the businesses in here.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of the opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah,
Woody?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm in favor of investigating this as a potential, definitely.
Okay with the
You guy?
Also, yes, with guidelines.
All right, so you
absolutely.
got the guidance to move forward from that aspect of it. So there's a secondary item on the table speaking to the existing non-conforming structures. What do we want to do about that? To me, that's an enforcement issue. Does anybody disagree with that?
No, but do we have any power over it?
Well, I think that is part of the question that brought us here tonight, is that right now the enforcement option is to essentially, I mean, at the most extreme, evict the people who are living there, because it is not allowed. There's no provision that allows residential to exist in that district. So that kind of prompted this question and discussion, is that if you work towards passing this language and including residential in that district, there might be a path forward for those existing units, which I know is currently kind of in the enforcement process, is what I understand, and has been taken, filed with the courts, and the judge has made a recommendation to at least see if there's a path forward. So you do have some say in that. If you move forward with this opportunity, that would be potentially providing a pathway And they would still need to comply with the building requirements and all of that, but it is two different kind of things that are happening with maybe one action.
Yeah, but I don't think we should like jumpstart the opportunity or make a decision now on what we're gonna do with residential, just to be able to protect a few. I mean, I feel for them if they're gonna get evicted, but I think our decision is more important than just being concerned with, a couple folks that are renting in there right now.
I agree. I wasn't trying to suggest that we jumpstart it. I was just, your decision will ultimately play into what that enforcement will look like, right? I don't know what the timeline is, what the judge is gonna say. There's a lot of different components, but if we move forward with this and a couple months down the road, if an ordinance gets adopted with guidelines, there is then a pathway for those those historically existing units to potentially become compliant.
Yeah, it's my only concern, and what I would personally want to avoid is a scenario where we make a change, we adopt this, and that gives them the ability to be grandfathered in with something that isn't compliant.
There you go.
Yes, and quite frankly, it's hard to sit in this position, as you all know, and get the acceptance of the entire community. However, we would like to get that, right? And before, at least my opinion is, for me to vote yes on opening up the opportunities in the city in such a great way, I would like to see some changes that we don't have power over, but I would like to make some recommendations to the city council that we do put some stricter rules on what goes on here. We all know that there have been some non-compliances with building requirements and permits, and we do have some enforcement problems. And I suggest that we press the city council to be a little more strict with these issues. I'm going to be reluctant to vote yes on opening this door until we see something like, say for instance, what are the penalties when builders don't pull permits? They seem to be very lax, and they should be more stringent so that when it happens, they don't want to do it again. And it goes with respect to people following our ordinances as well.
I agree.
I would press the council here, the planning commission, to draft some language to recommend to the city council that we have a bit more responsibility in our community.
I think it's a really important point to raise, and I know that you have Director of Public Safety Bullard and his department fully dedicated to enforcement. I know that McKenna and the building department that they are, including Jane as the planner, have done an immense amount of work to address inspections and enforcement and operational, I would say, efficiencies and effectiveness, which is raising a lot of these topics, right? Even the zoning ordinance committee that was established to address what is, frankly speaking, archaic language that is often contradictory or confusing. So I think the beauty is this process is awakening us to a lot of things that we need to address, that whether it's not clear, whether it hasn't been enforced appropriately according to ordinance language, and I think that's all in flight. But I really appreciate the comment, and council needs to seriously consider that. I think the other element too is, as we're navigating that, which is the opening discussion, it's how are we making decisions with the long term in mind so that we're putting the right guardrails in place as we're reinventing some of this language or as we're making these decisions. So I think it's all the right discussions, and I know Councilman Cox and I have a lot of these debates, including the short term rental discussion that we had navigated together. So
The bottom line, I think, is like, do you want a North Jib to look like Wyandotte when you walk down, and buildings right up to the road with, office living above it? Or do you want to push back and like a marina? There's only so much space.
Exactly.
So once you open the door, now you got to put, what are the requirements of those office spaces with the buildings? And you
Exactly.
can't just say it's allowed, because, they'll come in with a plot plan and stuff we got to look at, but
Well, we already have setbacks and stuff for commercial property, and that's gonna be the foot of any structure.
okay.
Yep. Yep. think it's a great discussion. I think clearly a need for more information. And I agree, it should not be a decision made off of existing or individual circumstance. As I mentioned, it should be a long-term decision with the right guardrails so that this commission can guide the future trajectory, because it's got big implications depending on what you decide.
13400 was issued a stop work order, according to Chief Tangway, and they just kept on going, and now people are living there, so you got what you got.
That's what this gentleman's saying.
Yeah, so I'm saying, same thing with putting the 26 places over there, the guy did it without permits, they put a stop work order on it, they did the work anyway.
Yeah.
No planning fees, no nothing, they just did it, and now you're allowing to go on. So
They paid dearly for the fine.
Huh?
They paid dearly for the fine.
$50.
And I think it's an honest systemic issue that everybody should be aware of, which is if you enforce, it does go to the courts, and the courts determine the fine amount. So I just want to be realistic about where
Right.
local government becomes, frankly speaking, very disempowered. I see our city planner nodding her head. We enforce, and then it escalates through the process, and we don't have any control over the court's discretion and that dollar amount and/or even enforcement of said dollar amount. So it's a realistic challenge of local government, and I think we all need to be aware of that.
Okay, any other actions, comments on that topic? All right, move on to postponed and referred items. I don't think there's anything there. Anything for commissioner forum? All right, need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Well, good evening again. Would love to call the Downtown Development Authority meeting in order. Since we've already done the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like to turn over to Clerk Tomasic to call roll.
Schumate?
Here.
Baker?
Here.
Bilt? Here. Cox?
Here.
Frazone? Here. Hutchinson? Olson?
Here.
Pyatt? Here. Upholzer?
Here.
Wood?
Here.
Do we need a motion to excuse Hutchinson?
Motion to excuse absent member?
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. I'd like to open up to public comment. Is there any public comment for the Downtown Development Authority? Just a shout out, you'll see Parks and Recreation Director Austin Reynolds sitting in the back. Thank you for all you're doing on the on-ramp, which will then bring us to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Everybody's beating me.
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Great. Commission members, in front of you, I'd like to take us to approval of previous meeting minutes. You will see item A, DDA minutes of 3/18/2025. Is there a motion to approve these meeting minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of 3/18.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bilk. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, I will bring us to our acknowledgement of correspondence. And this evening, we have item A, which is 2024-2025 DDA budget as of 4/10/2025. Is there a motion to receive and file this acknowledgement?
Motion to receive and file.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Wood. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? This evening, we do not have any unfinished business, nor do we have any new business. Anything for our DDA Director's Report?
Yes, just a few items I talked about at the council meeting as far as the DDA bond goes. The HVAC replacement at the Talbot Center is done. That's $108,000. That comes out of the DDA bond. City Council approved to go out to do repairs to the walking bridges at Milljib and West Jefferson. Those are in really bad shape and they're a safety hazard right now. So that'll be coming out. A rough estimate for that is probably around $26,000 for that. That'll be coming out of DDA bond also. Bids for the City Hall roof, which are coming out of the DDA bond, is set to, the bids are going to be open tomorrow. So there will be a recommendation, City Council, for that. And our engineers, Rains, are putting together bid specs to do the parking lots here at City Hall and the community center, and those are also DDA-approved items. So that's what we have coming down the pipeline right now.
Thank you so much for the update. Commission members, any questions on those updates?
That's already included in this budget, or that's gonna be on top of your capital improvement
That will be,
projects?
no, that will be taken out, the bond proceeds, the 248,698, out of the $900,000.
Okay,
That money's already been set aside and those projects have been designated.
for it.
Yeah, it was leftover money from the water main project. We had to identify projects that we were gonna use the leftover funds for,
Okay.
so. We're
And-
moving those projects forward.
Yeah, and last night we had a productive discussion at council around making sure we analyze those funds, amount remaining as it relates to broader project prioritization that came through this commission previously.
As the roof bids and the parking lot bids come in, obviously our director is going to be observing those funds and making sure they fall within the dollar amount and don't exceed the bond amount.
Yeah, there are other things in the bond that could be used for that. I'm holding off right now because I do not want to overspend and have to dip into DDA funds to pay for stuff that I overspent on. So once these projects are complete, we'll see where we stand. There's a few other things that were mentioned in the DDA bond language that we can spend money on, like a backup generator for DPW and stuff like that, which I'm not going to commit to until I see what I have left over.
Sounds good.
Any other questions or comments for DDA Director report? If none, we will turn over to our tabled and referred items for which there is none. While we have you, Austin, anything you'd like to update the commission on? Just generally speaking, while you have commission here. Cool. Any questions for Parks and Recreation Director? Obviously, you probably heard last night and all the social posts through Katie that there's a fun set of activities coming up this weekend for Easter. Obviously, deep into the planning for 4th of July. But any questions or comments there from commission members?
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, really appreciate it. All right, well, that will take us to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yeah. Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Wood, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Cox, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Have a great evening, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back around, we can't stay so long.
Welcome forward, Nick.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Looking forward to further discussion.